Thank you so much for joining me again on this channel. The first thing to say is thank you, not just to yourselves for your continued likes and of course subscriptions, but crucially to the magnificent individual who made these opening titles that have preceded today's video. Absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely respect this person's privacy, so I'm not going to say who they are. But they did an amazing job. I didn't even ask them to do it. They simply gifted it to me after only a couple of videos. So thank you so much. It really adds a level of professionalism that previously did not exist on this channel. And as always, thank you so much for your continued support, whether it's viewing them on your tablet, whether it's viewing them on your smartphone or on your gaming console, whatever it may be. So let's keep enjoying our learning and let's find out a bit more about Buddhism. Now, origin stories are really interesting, and whether it's Superman, Batman or Spider-Man, and maybe at one time on the movie section of the channel, or perhaps do a little piece about origin stories in movies. That could be kind of fun. But Buddhism has its own origins story, and what we're going to do is to find out how it came about. As always, a little disclaimer, I'm not going to have time to put into every single little detail of how this religion started, but what I hope to do is give you a few key points and also perhaps a few things just to really be thinking about. So if you know nothing about Buddhism, you're more than welcome. If you know lots about Buddhism, you are always more than welcome. Particularly, you might be able to highlight any deficiencies I've made in this little video. So, Buddha means awakened one, someone who is awake to the truth. And I think that's a really interesting thing to say, isn't it? To start off with. So it's about being able to see a reality, see what is before us. And I deliberately picked this image, not just because it had free licensing rights, but also because I love this idea of hands on that individual's eyes with the eyes closed. And actually, that's quite an important idea. So we're in 563 AD. We're in northern part of sort of top of India, and a young prince by the name of Siddhartha Gautama is born. And he has a lifestyle of absolute riches, an opulent way of living. He has everything he could ever need. And the story goes that one day he went on a journey, on a chariot journey, and he saw four things that really made him think. The first thing he saw was old age. He'd never seen old age before because the mythology, the origin story goes that he was surrounded by young people the whole time, and his servants were all young, so presumably if someone got over the age of 30 they were quickly shuffled off and someone younger brought in to replace them. So when he saw old age for the first time, it was a real shock. He didn't realise that people got old. And then continue on his chariot journey, the next thing that he saw was sickness, people being ill. Again, something he'd never seen before. He had a great lifestyle, presumably all the vitamins and minerals that he needed, didn't have to want for where his next meal was coming from. So he'd never seen people get ill before. Again, that must have been a real shock to the system. And then he saw a funeral, death. He didn't realise that life came to an end. Not even in the world of plants, because again the mythology is that the plants were around him and the fresh flowers were always replaced. So a really telling situation, and must have been an extraordinary moment for this young man to realise that life came to an end. And then the fourth thing he is supposed to have seen on his journey was a sadhu. A sadhu is basically a holy man, traditionally in Hinduism. Of course, we don't know what he looked like, but here is an image of a sadhu from today. And he had a moment of revelation, a moment that stuck with him like a splinter in his mind that he couldn't get rid of. That, hang on a moment, this person with seemingly any possessions at all seems happy, seems content. And he went home, Siddhartha, and then he did something quite remarkable, which is has its own moral issues in itself, because what he did was he escaped. Steve McQueen there from The Great Escape. Siddhartha left his wife and family, which I think is really intriguing in itself. And the reason why he left his wife and family was because he needed to find the truth. He needed to find out, essentially, how to be content in life. He was so driven and so focused by this that he was willing to leave behind the comforts of the palace and also his nearest and dearest. So that's something you might want to think and play around with when you're investigating Buddhism, which is how committed and devoted was Siddhartha to do this, and how willing would we be to do something that we really strongly believe in, to leave those who are dependent upon us as well. So he goes and he disappears off, okay, and what he then does is he decides to actually try and find out what the meaning of life is, effectively. And what he does, he sits underneath a tree and vows, okay, and this is about 6 years after he's left the palace, by the way, so I've truncated things a bit, to think about where life is. What does it all mean? And as he sits underneath this tree, again, the mythology of the origin story is that he was perhaps tempted by demons or bad dreams. I'm not entirely sure, but I find that fascinating, those different interpretations. And he comes up with enlightenment. He realizes that salvation comes from within. And this is such an important point about Buddhism and makes it so distinctive. He realizes that actually it's not about what comes from outside in terms of a god or gods telling you what to do, or any kind of sacred or holy text that's supposed to be revealed in some divine way. It comes from within. And it's this idea that as human beings, we are responsible for our own moral destiny. We are responsible for finding out how to achieve this life of contentment and satisfaction. And the way you achieve that enlightenment is through the Noble Eightfold Path, okay, which perhaps we'll look at in another video, another time. And yet again, okay, it's another thing to be thinking about, because this is obviously at this point, this is where he became known as the Buddha, because he became awake to the truth. And there's a fantastic quote by the Buddha, which simply goes, by gaining wisdom, we can reduce suffering. And that's the final thing I'd just like us to think about for today, which is that when we think about knowledge, when we think about facts, often it can help to alleviate and destroy any myths. It can often help to get rid of any untruths that are floating around. I think there's something quite powerful about that idea, that by using facts, okay, it can help us. But also this idea of wisdom, you can reduce suffering. And the Buddha was very keen on letting his followers know, and through the doctrine that he preached effectively, that we can reduce suffering. So there we are, a very brief overview of the origins of Buddhism. I hope there's been something there for you. Amongst yourselves, feel free to comment, and of course, if you wish to, like and subscribe. Thank you for viewing, but most of all, enjoy your learning.